So this group was inspired by serverless Lambda. When it started, we discovered it around 2017, started as regular backend developers gluing other people's APIs, but that enabled us to work closer with the front-end developers and voice-first developers, and then we became closer with the product managers because serverless would allow us to build MVPs and products much faster. It felt like a kid's playing with Lego pieces, and because it enabled us to achieve agility, we started defining serverless not just as technology but as new agile and the new mindset. And many of you who are long enough in IT, you observe discrepancy between the business needs and IT. And way too often we enjoy keeping our cars in the garage. We like these car mechanics instead of focusing on driving the business forward. So through the serverless technology and the mindset, we started shifting our focus from the tech onto helping businesses and reducing the gap between business needs and IT. So the focus of our meetups was that, and we do it through either bringing you more topics like for instance, in the one on Apache Beam Summit, we're going to be talking about the framework that can be hosted either in Google Dataflow or in Apache Flink in Amazon. That it's kind of component that you can bring to make your data pipelines better. We didn't firm up the meetup data, but it's happening sometime in spring with Patrick as preparation for you. He's the head of Google Engineering Canada team. So that will help you become better developers and architects. Next month, we firmed up the meetup with Gojko. Gojko is known to this community because he's an Amazon serverless hero. But Gojko is so much more than that. He's an agile coach. He's an entrepreneur, product business owner, has 500,000 subscribers to his product. So I'm looking forward to that chat as well to inspire you what you can build with service tech. And then if you have any ideas for upcoming talks, if they're not pitching, if something altruistic, however small or big it is, reach out to John and me, and we'll pencil in for the next for this year. And last but not least, Manning Publishing has been with us for a long time. At the end of every meetup, they give a free product. It can be video course, it can be ebook, or a live course. All you have to do is do this survey, bit.ly SLSTO, and then at the end we're going to do a raffle. And before I give the mic to Leigha, I just want to thank you. This is how, give us a short intro how we met. Last year I was working healthcare product, and we needed to build Looker dashboard. So while waiting for the Looker resource, I searched outside on the world what's available. And her code from the Looker days is still out there. This is some most beautiful dashboards for hospital operations. And thank you. I look like a hero. And then after that, we met when you were doing the talk about this architecture for retail, but the talk wasn't recorded, so I agreed to repeat it for this crowd and hopefully share some thought too. So thank you, Leigha. Take it away.
Awesome. Thanks so much for that introduction. I can go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. Let me share this one. And can you all see my screen okay? Probably loading right now. See the slide?
Yep, looks good.
Great, thanks so much. This week I'm happy everything seems to be working as planned right now because I got back from skiing, my ski trip in Europe, and my work computer was just completely broken, wouldn't turn on. So I have this half working personal computer. Has been a struggle, but so far so good. So I apologize if anything doesn't work exactly as planned or if I'm a little bit slower. But thanks again for the introduction. I always like talking to people in the community, so it's really nice to be in a small, intimate setting. Hopefully this is pretty casual, so if you have any questions, just feel free to interrupt, or if you have anything to add anecdotally about your own experiences, that's always helpful to share. But this presentation is really about, how you can use Google Cloud to do retail analytics. And it's not even necessarily needs to be specific to Google Cloud. A lot of it is how do we approach these retail specific problems that the industry is facing as we see this big, digital transformation, and how do we deal with all of this data in a scalable and governed way. So a little bit about me. My name's Leigha. I am a product manager at Google Cloud. So I started off at Looker like 4 years ago, so a couple years before the integration. And I was on the customer engineering side, so I worked really closely with customers who were evaluating Looker to see if they wanted to buy it as their business intelligence tool. And once Looker was acquired by Google Cloud, I switched teams and moved over to BigQuery, which is Google Cloud's data warehouse. And I worked on BigQuery's developer relations engineering team for a bit. So I was really focused on being involved in the community, creating like tutorials and blog posts and going to different events and helping BigQuery users get the most from their data. Pretty recently, like a couple months ago, I joined the product team. So I'm now working as a product manager, and I'm focusing on, Looker's application platform. So more the developer side of Looker, building data apps using Looker, but I also own kind of like the Looker BigQuery integration. So I'm still heavily involved in the data warehousing side. Anyway, so, I consider myself a product manager, but I also try to still advocate a lot for our customers. So I dedicate a lot of time to like staying involved in the community and getting feedback. So if you have any feedback on Looker, BigQuery, I'm really eager to take that back to our team. And I'm pretty active on social media. So if you do want to kind of stay in the loop with new announcements as it relates to data analytics, feel free to add me on LinkedIn or follow me on Twitter. Okay, so the whole impetus of this presentation is that the world of retail is kind of changing like crazy. So people who used to shop for everything in stores, suddenly found themselves locked at home 2 years ago during the pandemic. And all of a sudden, a lot of these people moved to online shopping. Maybe you're someone like me, and I used to love going to the grocery store physically, picking out all of my fruits and vegetables. And then once we all got kind of locked down at home, I tried out Amazon Fresh and Instacart, and it became really convenient, and it kind of converted me into this, big online shopper. And when we think about this digital transformation, more and more people are spending time online, especially in the context of retail. It's important to think about how that's going to relate to retail data growing super quickly, right? So all of a sudden we have way more advertisement data. We have like online purchase data. We get more granular insights from inventory and supply chain when people are ordering online. And a bit of context on this is I used to work at PepsiCo on the data science team, and I specifically worked on the e-commerce team. And what was really funny is that PepsiCo, like only a small percentage of PepsiCo's sales actually happen online, right? Most of the time it's from just like brick and mortar grocery stores. But we had way more data scientists on the e-commerce team than on the brick and mortar team, just because there was so much more data that needed to be analyzed and dealt with in the digital world. So I think we can all agree that, now more than ever, it's really important for retailers to be thinking about their data and understanding how to drive this digital transformation using data. So we can look at things like, how are we going to power AI-driven experiences, like recommending specific products at the right time on your website, understanding inventory allocation and like proactively planning for stock outs, whether that be in store or in warehouses for, omni-channel commerce. Also thinking more about personalized marketing. So not only just, recommending the right products on your platform, but also building the right audiences for external campaigns across different marketing attribution sources. And then, like store operations and logistics and fulfillment. So, driving efficiency into your supply chain and making sure you have the right amount of products ordered at the right time. And the problem is, so the problem is, like, a lot of these legacy data solutions are really struggling to provide those near real-time actionable insights. So if we think about getting more and more retail data, that's great. That's going to be super useful information. But when I talk to these retail customers, is a lot of it is growing, but it's still super siloed. So I might have, some data in like an Amazon S3 bucket. I might have some data that's living in the backend database of some SaaS application. I might have some stuff in, like a data lake, or some stuff in my data warehouse. And it's all kind of fragmented, and it's hard to get a complete picture of what's going on with the customer. And also, when we're thinking about these, legacy data solutions, a lot of them, don't have, really intelligent analytics built into it. So it's a bit more difficult to extract those actionable insights from your data. Maybe it takes more manual work, or maybe it takes importing that data into another system to use some machine learning libraries, or something like that. And basically, this all results in, teams not getting access to the complete picture or the exact insights that they need at the right time, so that they can take necessary actions to continue to drive that digital revolution or digital transformation. So like the two products that I focus on, BigQuery and Looker, but really it's, all about just modernizing your business intelligence stack in general. Taking this effort to get to the next level of business intelligence is going to really try to break down those silos, so that you have all of your data centralized in this highly scalable data warehouse. And using business intelligence tool or data exploration tool like Looker, you're really trying to create these actionable insights, so that decision makers at these retail organizations get their data delivered where and when they need it, so they can take immediate action. And of course, I think one thing that really draws me to, Google Cloud, and one thing that really excites me about working on these products, is just building this complete integrated platform. So, we have different tools that are all best in breed in one area. BigQuery is a great data warehouse, Looker, a great business intelligence tool, Dataflow, great ETL tool. And making sure that these tools are all really easy to connect and string together to create this one, unified integrated platform. So, one thing that's really interesting with BigQuery is I see these retailers doing super cool things just using all the power of BigQuery. So, BigQuery has built-in machine learning capabilities that allows you to do things like create demand forecasting models, or create like a matrix factorization recommendation engine, all in just a couple of lines of SQL. And it's flexible enough that you don't need to have like a separate data lake. You can connect BigQuery straight to unstructured data that might be in a Google Cloud Storage bucket, or you can use built-in integrations to import data into BigQuery's native storage if you need that extra layer of storage optimization. Sorry, I'm still recovering from a cold, but basically, like the thing that draws me to BigQuery the most is that it's just so easy to use. You don't need to do a ton of transformation to get your data in the right place. And you don't need to worry about people at your organization knowing, Python, knowing how to use TensorFlow, or all these, super heavy math, statistics, machine learning concepts. Instead, you can get started with machine learning at your organization, just a couple lines of SQL, without needing to bring your data into another place. And of course, this is the serverless MEETUP, right? So I think the nicest thing about BigQuery is you're not worrying about scaling up or managing a individual database. I'm not like tweaking my clusters or sizing my instance. BigQuery is completely serverless, so it's just scaling up to meet your needs. And as these companies grow and continue to get more data, BigQuery will continue to meet them where they are. Cool. So next piece, this is where Looker really comes in. So, BigQuery helps to break down those data silos. I'll show in a demo in a few minutes just how easy it is to kind of centralize data from lots of different places in the retail world into BigQuery so that it's all accessible from one interface. And then you connect BigQuery, or you connect Looker to that BigQuery environment to make these insights accessible for everyone. You know, when we think about a retail organization, we have lots of different teams that need data in different ways. Store managers might be asking, how do I maximize revenue across channels? Whereas ops and logistics are asking, you know, how do I manage supply chain and inventory better? And each person might need data delivered in a slightly different way or tweaked specifically to their needs. But at the end of the day, they need that self-service exploration capability to jump in and slice and dice data and ask these iterative questions to get answers and make those business decisions. So aside from just providing this environment, and you know, that's really what Looker is built off of, and I'll talk about that more in a second. It's, you know, providing self-service data analytics, is that under the hood, you know, we understand retail customers really well, so we try to build out certain analysis and open source them, similar to what Daniel was talking about before with the healthcare dashboards. So we try to create these things called like Looker blocks, which are essentially these pre-developed templates that talk about different, or that show you how to do different analysis that are really common in this industry. So stuff like customer segmentation, analyzing customer retention, looking at affinity analysis across your different products, and performing A/B testing. So Looker blocks are essentially just these templates where you can copy and paste a lot of this code to get started with doing these analysis that will provide the self-service data exploration capabilities to these individual business owners. So when we think about Looker, you know, it's going to sit directly on top of your data warehouse. And I'm a little biased, right? Because I love BigQuery, I love Looker, and I like to talk about them together. But Looker can sit on top of anything that's going to understand SQL. And Looker's secret sauce is called Looker-lite. And that's essentially this data model where you're defining your metrics. You're basically creating these files that are made up of SQL snippets that define all the different metrics that your organization would want. Sorry, I thought I was going to sneeze. So you're defining all these metrics in Looker-lite. And as your users are going and clicking around on the front end, Looker is going to use that model to compile SQL queries and send them back to your data warehouse on your behalf. And this offers a couple of different benefits. First of all, you're always going to have as real-time data as available in your data warehouse, right? So a user comes in and loads a dashboard, SQL is generated and sent back to my database and then returned to the user. So they're going to understand their business in near real time. Next is that, next is that you're creating this self-service environment that is still governed based on the metrics that you're defining in Looker-lite, which means that you're empowering people in your organization to go and ask these iterative questions of their data, but you're ensuring that they're getting data that's calculated the right way and you have consistency across your organization. And this is like super important for organizations, right? Like when I was working at Pepsi, we used Tableau and we would define metrics in individual workbooks. And inevitably at some point, like every quarter, people are reading out metrics, their presentations, and, you know, Karen is saying that she has one number showing in one Tableau workbook, and Joe is saying that he's getting a totally different number in his workbook. And then we have to do some reconciliation and figure out what metric is correct. Are there any errors? And basically everyone starts to lose trust in the data. So this idea of having this centralized governed data model that's powering this self-service exploration allows you to spend less time worrying about, you know, checking metrics and getting people to trust the data. And instead you're empowering people and accelerating their time to insights. And the last piece of Looker, which is the part that I think is the most exciting, is that it doesn't just end with creating a dashboard. You know, Looker is a way to explore your data, but we also encourage our users to create these data-driven workflows. So what I'll show when I kind of go into this demo in a little bit is that I can create schedules that send data from Looker to any other types of applications. So I can automate the creation of like a campaign for my CRM tool, or I can deliver data into other applications like a Google slide deck for my presentations. So we're not just looking at dashboards and consuming the data, but we're actually, taking action on this information and using it in downstream workflows. Okay, so if we think about kind of the entire picture here, the traditional approach, you have all this data in different places, and you need a specific data engineering team to like transform this data and push it into these legacy data warehouses. And then you have data in different places. You can't really join across these legacy warehouses, and they're not really flexible. So what you wind up doing is creating these extracts or cubes of data that lived in your business intelligence tool. And then if a business user, has a new question, you kind of have to go back all the way to the very beginning and reevaluate if you have the right data sources, do this data engineering, rebuild your cubes or extracts, and it's not really flexible. But what we're trying to get to with, BigQuery, Looker, and just the modern data stack in general is centralizing this data. And this doesn't always mean, moving the actual storage of the data itself, but more making sure that you can join across different data sources from a central location. And then you need some way to govern the data. So to create, a centralized definition or centralized metric store that shows how your different metrics should be calculated across the organization. And then that lends itself into these data experiences, which could include, just basic dashboards, self-service data exploration, or it gets more into the like fun and really business value heavy stuff, like integrating insights into tools that people already work in, or leveraging dynamic alerting, or feeding machine learning workflows, or even building out these entire custom applications that could be new revenue streams. So, like overall, I think what we're really trying to get to with Looker and BigQuery for retailers is making sure that people get real-time insights, making sure they're spending less time reconciling, preparing, getting trust in the data, and making sure that business users are able to answer their own questions without needing to go back to a data team, and that they can take immediate action on those insights that they gain so that you're really seeing the business impact of the data itself. Cool. So that was kind of like my intro overview of BigQuery Looker for retail. But now I want to kind of put, this all in the context of what an actual retailer would do, like how they would use BigQuery Looker, other parts of the GCP data analytics stack, and how that would result in, like business transformation. Okay, so let's pretend that we all work at Cymbal Direct, which is this, dummy apparel retailer. So it's not a real company. It's just like Google's demo brand. And they have a couple of different pain points. They came to Google Cloud and they're like, okay, we have a couple of things that we're really working on this year. First off, we want to provide product recommendations for our end users. So we want to be able to dynamically recommend products that we think this user is actually going to care about. Next, we want to build a seller analytics portal. We have all this data. Say I'm an e-commerce site, all this data about what's selling, when, who's buying it, and people who sell on my e-commerce site would pay for that information. Individual brands might pay for access to this data. So I'm going to productize my data and build this entire seller analytics portal. And my other goal is just to improve the efficacy of digital marketing. We're spending a lot of money on digital marketing, and we want to understand what's working and how we can kind of tweak those campaigns to be more efficient and effective. Cool. So the number one question I get asked from like customers or even internal people who are new at Google is, there are a ton of different data analytics tools. How can these all come together to create this unified platform? So if we take if we are pretending, we're focusing on Cymbal Direct's e-commerce store, Maybe they're using App Engine to host their e-commerce website. And the back end of this might be, a transactional database like Spanner. And let's say in Spanner, we have data about our customers and we have data about our transactions. So this is just like the back end tables in our database that are powering our e-commerce site. And then we have, some more like unstructured or semi-structured data. We have the ability to have customers write reviews for different products on our websites. And we have things like product images for all of our listings. And we don't store those in Spanner because that's, for structured data. So we've decided to store those in just a Google Cloud Storage bucket. And look, we want to be able to analyze all this information, plus more that we're going to get to in a second, all in that single central location, right? So this is where BigQuery might come into play. So with BigQuery, I can actually just write federated queries directly to Spanner or to Google Cloud Storage. So I don't even need to import this data. I can get real-time access to data that's stored in these other locations from a query in BigQuery. So I write my query in BigQuery, but it's still querying data that's stored in these other places. Okay, so we've got that part of our data squared away. Now, outside of just, the backend supporting the e-commerce site itself, we might be collecting like web events that are happening on our e-commerce site. Who's clicking where, and that all might be handled through Google Tag Manager. And don't ask me too much about Tag Manager because my level of knowledge is extremely high level. It's more on the marketing side. But I do know that we can stream events using PubSub. So basically, I'm creating this pipeline to ingest clickstream data in real time. And we can connect data flow to PubSub to transform that data. And we can connect data flow directly to BigQuery streaming API so that we have real-time ingestion of data. So streaming ingestion just row by row. And I'm going to be honest, like I am not a data engineer. I'm very savvy at SQL. I'm like pretty good with Python, but anything that has to do with like Beam or Java and all this stuff, kind of scares me. So data flow, I rarely touch, but me myself, I'm still able to set up a streaming pipeline in just a couple of clicks because of the really great integrations between these tools and like the templates and things that are available in both PubSub and data flow. So at this point, we have our customer data, we have our transaction data, we have some unstructured data, we have our clickstream data, all accessible inside of BigQuery. But I also have some data outside of Google Cloud. Most of these organizations are multi-cloud. They have data stored across Azure, AWS, and GCP. So I might have some inventory and distribution data stored in S3. And I still need to make that accessible in BigQuery because my goal is to create this, unified data platform where I can query across all these different data sets at lowest level of granularity possible. So the nice thing is I have kind of two options for how I want to make S3 data available in BigQuery. The first one is BigQuery Omni, which is the ability to actually run BigQuery queries in AWS itself. But that does have some limitations because the data is still stored in two different places, in two different clouds. So you can't join it at the lowest level of granularity. You would still need to do some, like porting data over into GCP to do low-level joins. But the thing that I think is rarely talked about but is super useful is BigQuery's data transfer service, where in just a couple of clicks, I can hook up a SaaS application or an S3 bucket or some other applications inside of Google as well into basically just a scheduled transfer. So I can say, hey, every day I want all the data from or all the new data in S3 to be appended to the end of my BigQuery tables. And it's like, a couple clicks. And kind of on that, point, I was talking before about how we are trying to improve our advertisement data. So I can also hook up advertisement platforms like Search Ads 360 up to data transfer service to bring it into BigQuery. Cool. And now I have a lot of data in BigQuery, which is great, but this data is all pretty raw and not super transformed or prepared for my analysis. So I personally like to use data prep for doing some wrangling and preparation of data. It's mostly all UI based, so it's really easy to get started with. So I can, aggregate, transform, join my data, and save it back to BigQuery. And at this point, I have all my different data sources accessible in BigQuery, which is great because now I can use some of the more advanced features of BigQuery, like BigQuery machine learning, which I mentioned before, to build these machine learning models in just a couple lines of SQL, or BI Engine, which essentially does really intelligent caching of your data so that things like loading a dashboard or scheduling a query end up being really fast. And BI Engine is perfect for working with Looker, right? Because I'm trying to create the seller analytics portal where I'm embedding different data points or dashboards into my portal. And I want those dashboards to load super fast because these sellers are paying me money. So I'll make sure that I have BI Engine turned on for the project that's feeding or that's handling queries from Looker. And the last piece is, I also want to make sure I am using or I am handling machine learning in a scalable way. So I can develop my machine learning model in just a couple lines of SQL, but I can also deploy my model to Vertex AI, which will essentially host my machine learning model as an API endpoint. Now I can just make a post request that says, here's a new data point. Please give me the customer segmentation or the product recommendation for this new data point. And then again, it's all really easy to connect. It's just like click of a button, and all of a sudden you have this API endpoint available to use directly in your e-commerce site. So again, it kind of comes full circle. We started with our e-commerce site built in App Engine. Now, at the end of the day, I can take my API endpoint for Vertex, have it accessible in App Engine, and I can also embed my dashboards from Looker directly in my e-commerce site so that my sellers can work with it. And kind of supporting all this stuff, as if all these tools weren't enough, there are other options that you have to kind of support this entire workflow. So to make sure everything stays governed and secure. So one of those tools is Dataplex, which allows you to configure access controls and deal with errors across different data sources. So I can get a unified view of my data that's stored in cloud storage and in BigQuery, and control access from one plane. And also for searching for data assets across all of my different, all my different databases, data warehouses, cloud storage buckets, and searching for metadata or managing metadata. That's all going to happen in Data Catalog. So the cool thing about like these two is that you really don't need to do any configuration to set this up. It's not like when you're pushing data into different places. It's more just navigating to the Data Catalog UI and GCP, and all of a sudden all your data resources are accessible from this view, and you can add in different metadata tags or do any searching on top of that. Cool. So we have our entire architecture, and it looks really scary, right? There's all these different things going on here. And the idea is that all these are just integrated through like, not much action on your behalf. So while it looks scary to have all these arrows, in practice, it's like all of this is really taken care of for us by the GCP engineering teams who are building integrations across all of these tools. So I'll just go through like a couple quick demos kind of to show you some of the things we talked about that I think are worth mentioning. So the first piece is, if I go back here, I'm not going to go into the demo of like PubSub and Dataflow, and I probably won't open up Spanner or cloud storage because those are things that are kind of boring to look at, in my opinion. But I think what is worth showing is kind of like the federation between BigQuery and Spanner. So if I have this kind of long query, but one thing I can do, I have data that's stored in Spanner and I want to access it inside of BigQuery. So I can just use this thing called an external query. And this is creating a federated query that goes to my Spanner database. So in this case, I'm looking at my transactions database inside of Spanner. I'm writing what my query should be for Spanner, and I'm using that directly as kind of like a source table in BigQuery. So this is really cool because I can join it with data that already lives in BigQuery, right? So I have all this awesome public data that's available in BigQuery. One of which, benefits of being part of Google is that we have all this really interesting data about Google search terms and top terms inside of the Google Trends data set. So I can take this data. Yeah, so I can take this data from Spanner, join it with existing data that I have in my table or that I've stored in my BigQuery data warehouse, and then join it again with data that's accessible through BigQuery's public dataset program. Right. So let me run this. And that will run for a second. Also, one thing that I think is super useful about BigQuery, like I mentioned before, is having the option to deal with, unstructured or semi-structured data, one of which is, a whole slew of different array and JSON functions. So now I can take all of my transactions that I have stored in my backend database, and I'm able to join it with this BigQuery public data set to see for each region where I have the most sales. So this is ordered by my total amount of sales coming from my transaction. What are the, the trending terms in that area? And this might be super informative for better recommending products, which was one of our goals. So if any of these, the trending terms or trending search terms will have to do with my product areas, I can kind of localize specific recommendations based on that information. So it's really helpful to be able to reach into other data storage places and get access to that information in real time. But what's also helpful is just adding that directly to a native BigQuery table if I want to take use of BigQuery's analytical storage capabilities. Like BigQuery data warehouse is built for analytics. So we have really intelligent storage stuff going on behind the scenes, stuff that's way over my head, right? Really, really smart Google engineers figured out different ways to encode and learn patterns in your data to store it in the most efficient way. So besides just reaching into Spanner every time I want my data, I can also just schedule a DDL or DML statement to grab, recently added data from Spanner and append it to a table in BigQuery. So instead of needing this complex ETL process or some third-party tool to connect my transactional database to my data warehouse, I can just schedule a simple SQL query, every day or every week, however frequently I want this to run, to bring that data over. Oops, probably did something wrong. But anyway, so once I'm going and creating this new table, let's say, I have this DDL statement that's running, it's going to create a new table in my data warehouse every night, or hydrate a table, an existing table in my data warehouse every night. So as soon as new tables are created in BigQuery, they become automatically accessible in Data Catalog. Like I mentioned that, two tools that just make it easy to see data across the different life cycle inside of GCP are Data Catalog and Dataplex. So Data Catalog, I can go in, I can search for a specific term. So I specifically created a transaction detail table based on that DDL statement. And I can come in here and do things like attach metadata tags to individual fields within or individual columns within my table or to the table itself. This is super useful because we can do things like tag a certain column as containing PII, right? So I can say, let's set the data governance tag. Oops. Let's use this tag. So I can set, that was a bad example. I can create a tag template that has data governance information. Like, does this contain PII? Does this contain, sensitive information? All that kind of stuff. And I can fill in those tag values just using this UI, or I can do it programmatically. And once those tags are added, they'll not only appear in this data catalog view of my table and of these individual columns, but it also becomes, like searchable metadata. So I can just use data catalog or data catalog's API to find the data that I need for my analysis. Cool. So the other piece I just wanted to show is that data transfer service piece. So I mentioned before that, I might have distribution center data and inventory data that's living in Amazon S3, or I have some data living in, advertisement SaaS applications like SA360. So just in a couple of clicks, I can, create this transfer that's going to bring data from these other applications into BigQuery on some scheduled cadence. So trying to bring data from other clouds and centralize it all into BigQuery pretty easily. And now that I have, a couple of my different data sources in BigQuery, we just showed how to bring data over from Spanner, and I talked about how to bring data over through BigQuery Data Transfer Service. Now I can start doing that more advanced analytics on top of this data. So I talked a little bit about BigQuery's machine learning capabilities. And I mentioned earlier how we're really trying to improve product recommendations. So one thing I might want to do is start to cluster my customers. And I can do this in just a couple of lines of SQL. So I can create a machine learning model. I specify the model type. So I'm just going to do a really basic clustering model using a K-mean algorithm, specify the number of clusters, and then just select the data that I'm going to use to train that model. So as you can see, it's really nice because I don't have to be importing this data from a data warehouse into a Jupyter notebook or into some other tool to do this machine learning. So I'll go ahead and, run this model. I actually think I may have had it created already. So let's see, I was doing this in ecom. So I can see this accessible from the UI. I can open it up and see details about this machine learning model. So what's the type of model it is, information about training, but I can see, data about how the training went. And bear with me, this is dummy data, so it doesn't look great, but I can look at kind of evaluation metrics, and most importantly, what we were talking about before is deploy this model as an API endpoint using the Vertex AI platform. So all I need to do is click export. I would export it to a Google Cloud Storage bucket, and then in Vertex AI, it's really easy to import that model and just push it to production into an API endpoint. Okay, so we've done some machine learning. We've built our machine learning model. We've, imported our data, done some data transformation or preparation, and now we might be ready to actually look at it in Looker. So let me hop over to the Looker platform. Inside of Looker, I can, spend time in kind of 3 different areas of the product. This first one that I'm in right now is just kind of like the browsing environment. This is where data viewers can just jump in and start to consume dashboards that are already created for them. And like I mentioned, you're not stuck starting from scratch when you're creating a dashboard. There's, we have patterns that are available on the community and inside of GitHub, but you can also access different blocks, which is what we call them, these templates that include both the model code and the dashboard code through Looker's marketplace, and kind of install things that are retail specific in just a couple of clicks. So let's go ahead and just hop into an example dashboard. Okay, so I'm in my dashboard, and dashboards are kind of like table stakes, right? We're going to be able to do similar things across the board. Like I can create an alert. I can add filters. I have lots of different data visualizations. But where things get really impactful is being able to actually do self-service exploration on top of this data. So from any of these tiles, what I can do is click this Explore from Here button. And that's going to bring me into this next kind of environment that I was talking about within Looker, which is the explore environment. So before we were kind of in this browse environment, now I've hopped over to this exploration environment. And these explore environments are curated for different types of users. So my data analyst has, built this explore environment for my team or for my group of users to get exactly the types of data I need to answer my question. And on the left-hand side, I can see all these different fields that I have accessible for me. And these are all defined in that modeling layer. So each one of these fields has like a snippet of SQL that's tied to their definition. And Looker uses that to compile SQL and send it back to BigQuery on behalf of my business users. So as a business user, I might have been looking at repeat purchase rate on that dashboard, but I'm really curious, how does repeat purchase rate actually differ across users of different age groups? So I can come to my Explore environment and I can simply bring in age tier into my query with just a couple of clicks. And if I look on the SQL tab, I can see the query that Looker generates for me on my behalf. And of course, I need, this like annoying case statement that no one wants to write, and people are probably copying and pasting it if they're working outside of Looker. But instead, I define this case statement one time in my LookML model, and Looker uses it to generate that SQL for me. And now I can, modify my visualization. We'll change the sorting. I can add different filters to it. I can pivot based on certain fields, or I can do something like save this, download it, save it to a new or an existing dashboard, open it up in Google Sheets, or the fun part is really saving and scheduling it to go to another application. So I'll just click send so you can see what this view looks like. And this is kind of where we talk about those data-driven actionable workflows. So we can connect Looker to other tools like to Salesforce or to Google Ads to automatically create different audiences based on thresholds that we see in the data. And Looker builds and maintains these actions that you see now, but you also have the option to create your own data action. So we've open sourced the framework and you can roll your own action and kind of host your own action server for your organization. So the last piece of Looker that I won't really go into because I want to leave time for questions and talk about your feedback. But the last piece is that develop tab where you're actually creating that data model. So you're creating that semantic model that just defines those metrics and defines relationships between tables that are living in your data warehouse. And the last thing that I'll show before we pause is, we walk through Looker a bit. We showed, a pretty basic dashboard. But what I'm trying to do on my organization is build this seller analytics portal. So instead of just using Looker as is, I want to use Looker to build this data application. So what I'm showing here is just like a pretty basic, like demo retail application. And if I click source, everything that's highlighted in this purple box is coming through Looker's API. So I'm making an API call to see how revenue has changed by the week, how visits have changed. And all of this is still going through that unified, governed semantic model. So we're still ensuring that we're calculating metrics the same way every time and that we have reusable data. But I can customize the way it looks and feels because I'm just writing an API call to pull that data into my application. Alternatively, what you see here is, this embed, this blue box, it's just an iframe. So as opposed to kind of rolling my own visualizations or handling of the data like you see in purple, I can also just embed an iframe of a single visualization or an entire dashboard to show that seller data back to sellers on my e-commerce site. Okay, so I realize I've been talking for a while now, so I want to pause and see if anyone has questions or comments. Thoughts?
Feel free to keep going. We enjoy it.
Does it resonate with you? Like, do you feel like you talk to at your company, or do you talk to other companies that are kind of dealing with data silos or issues with governance?
So you finished the presentation. We can start Q&A. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I want to. I mean, I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so
No.
let's
It's awesome.
jump and.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I hope everybody else did. So far, there was only one question for you, but that was when you just started, when you're talking about your history at PepsiCo, when you're using Tableau. Because lots of places, Tableau has become default standard. So it's hard to say why you will want to use Looker. Like, I'm not asking for sales pitch, but some kind of how do we handle that question?
Yeah, so not only did I use Tableau in a previous role, but I also teach a data science class at Rutgers, and we use Tableau in that class. So I actively use Tableau all the time. And I think Tableau is a really great tool. And I think that there's a lot of times there's a world where both like Tableaus and Lookers coexist in big organizations. And the reason is because Looker, our focus is on that semantic modeling layer. It's ensuring data governance. It's making sure we have this, scalable API embedding, building data products. Like, we're never going to try to meet up with Tableau's data visualization capabilities. Like, they have beautiful data visualizations. You can like create any visualization you want in just this like point and click environment, which is awesome. But that's why we're also investing in this partnership with Tableau, where you will be able to connect Tableau to Looker's semantic model. So you still get the power of Looker. You still get that governance from that modeling layer, but you get best in breed like data visualization coming from Tableau. Now, that doesn't work for every company, and it's really dependent on what matters the most to that team. A lot of people feel like Tableau, it's easier to create the type of visualization they need, so it might make sense to use Tableau. But a lot of people also feel like dashboards, visualizations aren't the important part for me. It's creating those operational workflows. So maybe Looker is just like sufficient as is.
Sorry, did you say that was in the works, like in the future, or today is their ability to use Tableau with the semantics of Looker?
It's being built right now. I don't remember the exact release date. Like they announced it at our conference in November, and actually a lot of the work is being done by like Tableau's engineering team because they have to build the connection. But it's something that's actively being worked on right now. I saw any limitations when using federated queries. So I think the biggest limitation from my perspective is you're writing this external query that's going to the transactional database. That's still, like in my example, I'm like, Spanner is the back end of our e-commerce site. You probably don't want to be putting a lot of load on a database that's serving up data for your e-commerce site, right? So I would just keep that in mind when you're actually crafting the queries to Spanner or to whatever that federated source is. Because if you're like hammering these huge queries, like you don't want to accidentally like slow down your database and have your, e-commerce site load faster or load slower. So I just keep that in mind, when you're scheduling queries and when you're designing those queries. I see, how does BigQuery compare with Snowflake? So I think, it's like personally, it's like they're both data warehouses that are really effective and efficient, and you could analyze huge amounts of data really quickly on either platform. I've used Snowflake before and I've had really good experiences. I think, where BigQuery tends to shine is that BigQuery isn't its own company. It's one tool that's part of this Google Cloud platform. So we're focusing on like optimizing Looker for BigQuery, and we're focusing on building data flow integrations with BigQuery. So it's not just the data warehouse that you're getting, it's this ease of use with integrating with data sources on either side of BigQuery. So making it easier to get data into BigQuery from other parts of GCP and making it easier to use that data in other parts of GCP. And I would also say like the machine learning capabilities in BigQuery are pretty unmatched. And that's just something that I think Google shines. One thing, AWS is really good at a lot of things. Azure is really good at a lot of things. But I think most people would agree that Google really shines in like the machine learning and advanced analytics capabilities. And the same technology that's powering like Vertex AI and our AI platform is this is the technology that's powering BigQuery machine learning. Does BigQuery use PostgreSQL? BigQuery you can connect to Cloud SQL, which has Postgres as a federation source. Like I talked about Spanner, which is a transactional database, but you can do the same thing with Postgres if it's hosted in GCP.
One interesting addition there, recently Spanner added addition of Postgres dialect for Spanner. So if you're familiar with Postgres, your apps should work in Spanner.
Oh yes, I think that's right. I have heard that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's like a compatibility with the SQL itself, which is great. Do you have any suggestions to use if we want to run Python under a Looker dashboard? So Looker, in my experience using Looker and Python, I guess trying to think of the best way. So the most common way that I use Looker with Python is Looker has a Python SDK, which makes it really easy to grab data in a Jupyter notebook from like a couple of lines of code to access Looker's API. So like in my experience, when I've worked with customers who are using Looker and Python together, a lot of times you are maybe exploring the data in that self-service exploration environment I showed, and that becomes your data set that you're using for deeper analysis or in machine learning inside of Python. So it's really nice is I can go to that explore, like point and click, and I just copy and paste that query ID that's generated in the URL. And then I plug that into like 2 lines of Python that are like, get data from explore, here's query ID. And now I have that exact data set. To me, like that's a lot easier than trying to like type out this really long SQL statement in like some Python to BigQuery connection, because even like I wrote SQL for many years and then I started using Looker and I was like, I will do anything now to avoid writing raw SQL. Instead, I'm going to go to the Explore environment and I want to point and click and filter, and it just makes it a lot easier. So I think that's the most common way that I see people using like Looker inside of Python. And there are API calls for dashboards as well. So I can like get all the data from a dashboard using an API call.
And folks, you don't need to type the questions, like we are here live, like it's not school. So just open up your microphones. So what I heard, what I start seeing questions like we covered that before you started. People are wondering, I have DBT, why would I use LookML? Like, can you compare those two?
Yeah, sure. So I will preface this by saying I really have DBT is one of the few tools in the modern data stack that I haven't extensively used myself. So this is more like secondhand information. But in my experience, like DBT really solves the data modeling task before it is in your database, or like preparing it while it still is living in your database. So that's doing transformations that are persisted back to your database. Like I'm going to transform this data into some aggregate version, whatever, and save it as a persisted table. And in Looker, you're defining metrics that are calculated at runtime. So it's often logic that needs to be incorporated into the query that's answering a specific question. And you'll notice that's why it's really purpose-built for self-service exploration, because I'm like asking these iterative questions, and Looker needs to use that logic to compile the query at runtime, as opposed to DBT is like solving the modeling problem before it even gets to Looker. So it's like, really, how do I prepare my data for analytics, not how do I do analytics on my data, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense. So it's a really ELT tool to do transformations because storage is cheap. And then you are doing the governance, so the dashboards look the same, not like in the PepsiCo case you mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And with that being said, like I think I remember hearing that at DBT's conference, they talked about like creating like metric definitions. I don't know what the exact term is, but basically trying to get more to the place where Looker is. So not only defining metrics to be persisted to the database, but also calculating like analytics metrics. I don't know much about how that's trending or what's going on with that, but if they got to that point, I think then it would be a question of like, do you really need both of them?
But maybe you can mention it like Malloy, like that may answer the question. There is no need to develop it. There is open source product.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think what'll be really cool is what we're seeing inside of Looker on the product and eng team is that there's a really big focus on like LookML as a service, essentially. So it's like, how can we like decouple the modeling layer and the SQL generation, which is really the like cool part of Looker, from the rest of it. So it becomes like this service where like I hit an API endpoint and then it just generates my SQL for me. And it's like headless BI. So I can hook it up to like any dashboarding, any data visualization, hook it up to my Python notebook. You know, like we're still really far from that, but I think like that's where the industry is headed. Like I'm seeing a lot of other data tools pop up that are like model specific, and you know, it's like all about modeling your data, and you can do like dashboarding anywhere.
That's cool. Tell them about Malloy, some of the folks who were not there at the beginning.
Oh, talk about Malloy. So
Yeah.
Malloy, I think, is essentially that, like it's this open source language to make SQL easier to write. So you're basically like modeling small snippets of data, and then you can think about these, like I think Malloy is used in Python. So you can think about like calling like a Python variable name, and on the back end, or it's basically translating that into like a fully functional SQL statement. So it's really cool because it's totally open source. I wonder if I have the GitHub link to show, because I know that team is really looking for a lot of feedback. So if anyone does have feedback on it, or you have a chance to look, definitely let me know. Feel free to message me on LinkedIn or Twitter or anything. Oh yeah, you already put it.
So what are they actually assembling the queries in then that generates the SQL? Is it like a JSON or a YAML, or is it its own beast? Like what does Malloy look like?
It's basically its own type of syntax, but it's kind of similar to YAML.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. It's like very basic syntax. I wouldn't quite define it as YAML or JSON, maybe somewhere in this in between, but it's like very like key value pair is like really easy to understand. But yeah, it's super cool. I haven't had as much time to play around with it as I want, but actually tomorrow I'm going to this like internal meeting where they're gonna like demo it and give an update. So I'm really excited.
That's cool.
Who is the target audience for Malloy?
Really just like people who are writing repetitive SQL statements. So like data analysts, data engineers, like it's trying to make the task of writing SQL easier.
And you mentioned it was written by the creator of Looker-lite, like his next pet project.
Exactly. So like the Lloyd Tab who founded Looker, he is the one who's leading up Malloy.
Gotcha. Thank you.
How does Looker actually run? Like I understand BigQuery is obviously as a service. Is all of the Looker stuff as a service, or when you start to use it, do you specify some instances that you're going to spin up and scale them and size them accordingly? How's that experience?
Yeah, so it's the latter, and this is one thing that is like not the best about Looker. And the nice thing about us integrating into Google is like we're really reevaluating our like the way we're doing infrastructure and stuff. Right now it's a Java application. So it's literally a jar file that our team, we have a DevOps team that would host it for you, or some people choose to host it themselves. So we spin up like a single tenant environment. So we literally spin up like a MySQL database, like load balancer, like compute engine. We deploy the jar file on the compute engine, and then we give you like your company's URL to log into Looker. And basically the Looker jar file itself is updated every month with new features. So then we can update it for you, or you can choose to, like self-host it and get the latest jar file, update it yourself, all that stuff. But I think like the future of everything is becoming more microservices that are multi-tenant. So that goes back to kind of like this idea of like, can we get further around like this like unified semantic layer? It's all just a lot of stuff right now, but I think the whole industry, like all these kind of legacy tools were all going through a similar like engineering evaluation where it's like, how can we create these like small microservices? So that's right now, Looker is a jar file, but I would bet if you come back in a couple of years from now, it's going to have a totally different architecture.
That is insightful. I had no clue. Like it appeared as a service, but I couldn't self-provision myself. So you had to wait to be approved. But that's because of the manual process for somebody to create environment for you.
Yeah.
So that is a good one. So maybe for other people watching the meetup recording, we had a guest about a year ago, Joe Emison. He's running in Columbus, Ohio insurance company branch, completely on Amazon stack, but his analytics is on BigQuery and he's using Looker. So during Q&A, we asked him why he chose Looker, not Tableau at the time, and he didn't want to manage servers. So Looker was accessible through the KPI as a SaaS product, but with Tableau, he had to run the servers. So now you are giving us some insights that it's managed for us by you. Okay.
Exactly. Like our team will do all the management. So it's, and like Looker was always bred in the cloud. So like Tableau, you know, like originally it was just a desktop application and kind of like moving to the cloud, it was an afterthought, really. It was like, okay, now there are like 3 different products. You have like Tableau desktop, you have like the free online version, then you have like the paid server, you know, it's kind of confusing. Like Looker is just like, no, always in the cloud. You could choose to host it yourself on your own infrastructure, but most of our customers allow us to host it for you because like, you know, we'll scale up as needed and make sure you have your updates without you needing to do anything.
That's cool. And if it becomes slow, do you auto scale it, or we have to tell you we need more capacity? Is it
no, we would do auto scaling.
Okay, so we don't need auto. That's
yeah. So like it's the fact that it is single tenant doesn't really mean anything to the front end except for like your data. Like some customers really like that because it's like your data lives in your own, you know, your own instance of MySQL. Like it's not touching any data from other places.
That is so cool. And is there a playground place where people can just log in? It was hard to find. Luckily, I work for a partner who has the account, so I play there. But like with Tableau, it's much easier to start with a public one. So they recruit people faster because you just log in and start playing. Is there something like that in the works for Looker?
We're definitely actively working on it. And one thing, I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Data Studio, but Data Studio is like Google Cloud's or just Google in general is like free dashboarding tool. And we announced at our conference in like November that the Data Studio team has now like totally moved under Looker. So we're all one team. So we're trying to figure out like how Data Studio and Looker are going to work together. But I think like there's a possibility that Data Studio becomes kind of like that Looker-lite, like kind of like a free version, and they become like kind of one code base. Obviously, like we're really far from that, and it's like there's a lot of, you know, talk and brainstorming the best way to do that. But it like making Looker more accessible for people is like one of the top priorities for this year because right now it's also a high touch sales motion. Like you have to talk to an individual person who has to go and manually like spin up this instance. So it's we kind of recognize that we need to make that more self-serve. So there's a ton of work that's being done on the engineering side to try to make it so that people could, you know, like play around and onboard onto Looker without needing a resource.
That is so cool insight. Thank you for sharing, because I was ignoring Data Studio for a long time. So I don't know if other guys are using in BigQuery. Easiest way to visualize data for me was using Excel export, Google Sheets connector. That's brilliant. So if you know Excel, you can do any visualization. Excel, you can do it in Google Sheets. So
yeah, Data Studio is great. I've been like playing around with it a lot now that they're part of our team, and I'm very impressed because in my head I was always like, oh, Data Studios is like free tool. It probably doesn't work that well, and I admittedly like didn't really try it out much. But now I've been using it a lot, and it's really great. So I'm super excited to see, you know, like how that relationship grows in the future.
That is awesome. Any other question, guys? This is not just 3 of us chatting. You can turn on camera mics and.
And like it sounds like there's a lot of questions about like, you know, the future of the product and stuff. So I would highly recommend people going and looking at Looker Join.
Yes, that's a good conference. Unfortunately, somehow you and Tableau timed it in the same week, so people had to make up their mind. So, and you're the smaller company.
So crazy, yeah.
But they're recorded.
Daniel?
Sorry, so Looker, before Google acquired them, they had their own conferences. and they call joint conferences. And Leigha gave some talks before there as well. And this year, in 2021, the joint conference was the same week as Tableau conference. So it was really kind of hard to juggle between work and two competing events.
I know. Let's see. Here is like this blog post that kind of talked about some of the things that were announced at this conference. And I think it was all online. So I imagine that talks were all recorded and are somewhere on YouTube. Let me see. Oh yeah, you can. Yeah. If you go to this link, you can actually see like all the recorded talks. So there are some pretty cool ones about like the future and just like cool things you could do with Looker.
That's cool. And you mentioned at the beginning you're going to be contributing more to the source code, these Looker blocks to use. That really helps. Like it got us moving so quickly with the healthcare operational dashboards.
That's awesome. It makes me very happy to hear that because I spent a long time on this.
It needs to be touched, so you don't have to do that. They can reach out to me as well because you were using old data set.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
So I don't know if people are playing with the healthcare data, but there is this FHIR standard, and Google has public open data set, and they use like FHIR on SQL. So they serialize JSON in BigQuery inside. So it was really like beautiful SQL and Looker dashboard you wrote. So.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
Happy to help. Yeah, hopefully we're going to be pushing. So one of the things that I manage is Looker's marketplace, which is where you can actually like install all those blocks. So we're doing a lot of work to kind of revamp that marketplace and make it easier and more performant for customers to use. But as part of that, we're trying to get more content in there as well. So if you ever think of like good ideas and also like we're trying to open it up to community contributions. So if you make changes to like, the healthcare block on top of the FHIR schema, like you could submit that into the marketplace too. So.
Okay. That's cool. And what else? Yeah, when you did this talk first time, source code wasn't available. Like, do you have something you can share after the meetup, like some source code that you demoed, or maybe any part of it? Like,
yes, I can show the stuff for that e-commerce dashboard that I was showing, and I can send over my SQL queries that I demoed too. So.
And that App Engine one. Interesting one because we mostly use Looker directly, but you demoed integration with third-party apps. Is that something? Some samples available like the App Engine to Looker blocks for the SaaS app?
I think we have that somewhere. Let me make a note, and tomorrow I'll try to check with the person who built that if it's open sourced.
Because like in the Looker itself, we used to have to click into a reload, recalculate icon often. And so it wasn't very responsive. It was like separate click top right corner. And so people are talking, I didn't use it, integrating into React more responsive apps as like what you demoed.
Got it. Yeah, I'll try to, I'm pretty sure that we have that code mostly open source. So I'll try to figure that out and I can email you.
Perfect. And then the slide deck, will it be available for the people that we share after the?
Yes, I can do that.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, we still have half an hour or like 15. If you have questions.
Yeah, I have a question. What Daniel was leading up to is like how to embed Looker, charts and things like that in React or Angular or any one of these frameworks?
Yeah, so there are a couple different options. They're just, you can make like a standard API call. So we have a JavaScript and TypeScript SDK. So you can use it directly in, like your React code or your Angular code. And that's to like return like a JSON format of the data. So that's like, how many orders were placed today? Okay, it's 5. And then I can, just like use that in my React components. The next one, so that's like super custom. And then on the total opposite side of the spectrum, it's like you could just embed an iframe. So that's just like an iframe JavaScript tag with a URL to a dashboard or to an individual visualization. And our JavaScript SDK helps with authentication for that iframe. So you can still enable like single sign-on so that your user signs into their application. And with our JavaScript SDK, you basically, incorporate some authentication information into that iframe URL. So there's like a URL builder part of that SDK. Then somewhere in the middle, and this is stuff that's actively coming out. So I think we talked a little bit about that, like Looker product vision, that like blog post I just sent, is that our team has been working on these like React UI components. So they're just like React components that you could use in your application. They're all open source. So right now they're mostly around like matching the UI of Looker. So like buttons and like filters and like, stuff like that. And we actually use them in the Looker code itself. But I think they're in like maybe private preview or something right now. But our team is working on these like visualization components. So there will be like actual React components. Let me see if I'm just looking at this blog to see if they talk about it. Look at components. Today we announced so it says we have visualization components. So it's basically this open source toolkit where you could do things like specify, again, like I was talking about before, the query ID from that Explore. So you could just specify the query ID in your React component for like a scatter chart. And then you would have that component available. So I think those are in private preview right now, but I imagine like pretty soon they would go into a public preview. So you have kind of like a variety of different options. Totally custom with the API, somewhat custom, not iframe, but using these React components, and then totally out of the box, just using an iframe.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, that was very helpful.
Awesome.
Anybody else? What would you recommend? How would somebody start to learn Looker? Like now, they're curious, and is there like starting place or sandbox?
Yes. Let me send
course or
next. This website has a lot of like training resources. So a lot of like, free lessons and things like that. And if you think you're interested in like participating in a Looker trial, I'm trying to find that link. You can sign up for a free trial here. Full disclosure that, like I said, it's still a high touch sales process. So when you fill out this form, you will be contacted and asked to talk to a real live human. This is being completely honest. But yeah.
That's cool. That is awesome.
Awesome. Yeah. And definitely, like, if you have feedback, questions, whatever, please reach out. I'm available on LinkedIn and Twitter, and I'm happy to chat.
Anything else from your that we forgot to ask that we should have asked you from your experience using Looker with Google or before Google?
I don't know. I think like one thing we didn't talk about that I think is super interesting is that I'm going to keep an eye on, but it's not really related to Looker. It's just like this reverse ETL stuff. I don't know if people have heard about like Census or other companies, but I think it will be really interesting to see how these other tools evolve that essentially like connect your data warehouse to other tools. So I showed Looker's like action where I can send data to like Salesforce or other stuff. So these tools, that's like all they do. And some of them connect to Looker, or some of them connect right to your database. But I think that'll be like, I talked a lot in the beginning about how like, this wave of like data has been about breaking down data silos and like self-service data exploration. I think this next phase is going to be really focused on like delivering data to other tools. So it'll be super cool just to see how all these data tools evolve to meet those needs.
That's cool. So to me, reverse ETL is really ELT, but I may have gotten it wrong. Is that what you're talking about? ELT process and the tools to massage, like DBT, Stitch, Fivetran.
Yeah,
What?
so those are like, I think like those ELT services are like get data from source into your database,
Mhm.
but this is like get data from your database back to some other application. Like
Ah,
I'm sending information back to Salesforce to like record that this customer is at
Oh.
risk based on some trend I saw in the data.
oh,
Or like I am kicking off a workflow to like automate a Slack message because my customers hasn't made a purchase in 2 weeks. Like
oh.
basically it's like going full circle. So it's like
Two-way
reverse
street,
ETL
yeah.
because you're like going from the database back to like these other applications.
Oh, that is awesome. But you mentioned CRM integration. Is that something you can talk more about it? There was one of the slides and we didn't pay much attention, but it's really, that's the feedback loop you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So the way Looker does this is we have actions that our team maintains, and it's kind of difficult because that's only one part of our product, right? Like we have our focus is on the semantic modeling layer, and like actions are great and they're super useful, but really like our goal is to make it easy for other companies to build their own action. So like you could write some code that basically says, okay, when Looker delivers data to my post request, my endpoint, I'm going to process this data a bit and then send it over to Salesforce to like add a new field to my customer account based on that data that was delivered. But it will be really interesting, I think, to see these like reverse ETL companies evolve because their whole focus is just on that one part of the data funnel. So I think they'll really like optimize how data is delivered to other applications. And a lot of them connect to Looker. So I can still schedule a report from Looker to deliver data to Salesforce, like through these third-party tools. So I think they're still pretty new and I've just been like reading about them and like hearing about them on Twitter and stuff, but I think it'll be really interesting to see it evolve.
But the way you describe it sounds more like a general workflow, a workflow for the whole organization. That sounds like Segment, the company Twilio picked up.
Yeah.
Like
actually a lot of the people, so I was looking at Census just because I've seen them pop up a lot. I think they recently got funding, and a lot of the people who work at Census came from Segment. So
that's cool. Okay, Segment was one of the talks we were planning for this year. But
that's awesome. Segment is such a really cool tool. Like in the early days of Looker, we worked super close with them.
So I'll tell you the secret how we come up with the ideas for these meetups. We just follow what Joe Emison does. Like he's such a creative mind, true serverless mindset, and he doesn't want to code anything. So every time he would find service, he would incorporate. So we had Algolia that he was using for search. Like with a bunch of meetups that derived from the tools he used. And Segment was the next one. Even Fivetran, the meetup was related because
that's
he was
awesome. I love Fivetran. That's
so
like
I call his serverless jobless because he doesn't have an IT team. Like it's just the business folks doing the insurance claims.
It's so accurate. Love it.
That's cool. Using
Segment, BigQuery, and Looker. What a great
Can you
combo.
tell us something about it? Is your microphone working? Please tell us. Francis, I can cut out the recording if you don't want to share this. We cannot hear you.
Maybe microphone isn't working.
Ah,
Oh,
okay,
sad.
no. Okay, so we'll have you talk about Segment.
It's awesome. Yeah, I honestly, I think it'll be just really cool to see like how, like right now I think about delivering data to these other applications in a very like basic way, like, oh, change a field value, change this. But I think because there's this whole new group of tools that are just focusing on this area of the data stack, they'll be able to like think of things that we haven't even thought about yet.
That's awesome. So we're gonna do a raffle soon, but we don't need to stay until late if you don't have any more questions. But this is a unique opportunity really to talk to you live. Any other questions? Anything, future of IT? Retail was just example. I love the demo you did, but you helped other verticals. You helped healthcare. You helped retail. What other blocks do you have from Looker?
We have all kinds of blocks. So we have a lot of stuff focused on marketing. I guess that's not really a vertical, that's a horizontal. And I've done a lot of stuff in manufacturing, like IoT data, which is all really cool. One sector that Looker pays a lot of attention to, but I try to avoid, is the public sector. And like, too many rules. I don't want to work with that data. But I know it's a big focus for like Google Cloud in general right now. So I'm sure there will be lots of blocks related.
But you did healthcare. That's the worst of public data.
Yeah, but healthcare, I feel like, is interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I don't even know we do a lot of stuff with horizontals. Like we work closely with the contact center CCAI team. I can't remember what the
yes, CCAI is the name.
Artificial
but I couldn't find the blocks there. I only found the SAF block, but that was the generation of CCAI before it was called.
And we have a dialogue flow block too.
Come on. Is it available somewhere? Do you have a link?
It's in the marketplace, I think. If it's not in there, I think it already is in there.
I didn't know. That is so cool. That's amazing for getting the insights from the call recordings and sentiment. But that block was in the works when I looked at it, and SAF block wasn't working very well.
I don't know if you've seen this, but that's like the public version of our marketplace. So you can just search for stuff there. So if you search for dialogue flow, then you can see the code. You get a link straight to the code in GitHub, or if you're accessing the marketplace in your application, in the Looker application itself, then you could just click install. But
that is amazing. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
I have a question. Which certification would you recommend for someone coming new into this Looker BigQuery?
I think there's a Look-ML developer certification. I can't remember if these have changed, because some stuff has changed while we're trying to integrate with like Google Cloud's education services. But it used to be that there was kind of like a I don't want to say front end, but like a data viewer or data explorer certification, something like that. And then there was like the Look-ML developer one. And definitely the Look-ML developer one is, if you're actually writing SQL and will be developing your Look-ML models, that's the one to do. I feel like this stuff around, using the Explore environment and building dashboards, or you could probably figure out on your own or just watching YouTube videos. But Look-ML, it's really helpful to have like structured training around.
Thank you.
No problem. And if you do the latest Look-ML or the latest Looker training courses, you might see my face. I think I recorded some of the videos for there.
That's good.
A lot of those training videos are on that link I sent above, like connect.looker.com. So I would definitely check that out.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Anybody else? So do the form bit.ly.slstl. I'll do the raffle soon. So any other things that we should mention, like in the following meetups from Google Cloud that you see big new development? I heard about this data form acquisition. What is that company about? Maybe can you?
Oh yeah, Dataform is like I think I would say direct competitor to DBT. They do similar things. I don't really know that much about them. They were acquired, and it's a very small company, so they've been pretty quiet. I think they've just been like heads down working on their like big launch. So I don't really know that much, but it seems like cool data transformation stuff. I think like Dataplex and Dataplex is going into general availability pretty soon, so that's cool. Yeah, trying to think like data catalog, I think, is
Mhm.
there's a lot of stuff that's on their roadmap that seems really interesting. Like I think they're looking at more like data lineage stuff, which will be really cool.
And before we started, you mentioned you participated in the meeting where BigQuery team had some new developments. What were the highlights? Because like nobody can catch up with changes in real time.
I think like it's I don't know how much of this stuff is launched or how much of it is in preview, but like there's a lot of work being done to like rethink the way you can like reserve compute, because right now BigQuery has like two distinct pricing models. It's like, you know, you could go with like the serverless option where it's just like BigQuery takes care of everything under the hood and you pay for what you use, or you could reserve like specific compute resources by purchasing slots, and then you're purchasing them for some duration of time. You're like, I need, you know, 5,000 slots for the whole month or something like that. But I think based on like a lot of feedback from customers, they're trying to like reevaluate and see if there's like a better model, I think, that meets people in between, so that you're not like paying for resources that you're not actively using, but you still make sure you have enough resources to like run your queries at the speed that you want them to. So I don't know how much of it is launched. So I don't want to go into too much detail in case it's not public yet. But I think like overall they're just kind of making sure the model works for all customers and trying to, you know, make sure that people are only paying for what they're using.
Awesome. I was checking the form. Only 5 of you did the form, so you can paste your names here before I do draw. So odds are really good. Not too many people are interested in mining products, but they have some really good Google books as well. And you can write a book for Looker.
Yeah.
So put your names here if you're interested in the book. I will add them if you don't want to do the whole form. Perfect. So you keep chatting while I open the form for the draw. Actually, I can share the screen.
We got a few other names there, George and Joe. Oh, sorry. Oh, did you share your screen? I'm not looking.
I'm starting to share
okay.
right now, but like we can. So this is wheel of names. So these were only 5 names I saw in the survey. Let's see here. Okay, Leigha. Why not? No, where is it here? And then who else we have? Joe? Francis, yes. You need to fix your microphone. We want to learn from you. Joe. Anybody else? John, you never want books. Like, why not?
Well, I didn't think I was eligible. But sure, put me in this time. Hey, I got good odds this time.
Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, going once, going twice. So okay, we'll do the spin. Better.
Oh, that's not fair. Is it me or is it Jose?
It is you. It is you. You know, in 4 years, it's fair. You take your first book in 4 years.
Yeah.
The lucky day, John. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Never had a
So you know the drill.
As long as
Congratulations,
you
John.
say it's okay, Daniel.
Huh? Sorry?
I said, as long as you say it's okay.
No, it's fine. So this started when we had the guests from Serbia. What was this? Node.js book. So they introduced Slobodan. He introduced us to mining folks. And then first we were giving his books, and then they said, okay, just give anything. So it's cool.
Oh, that's been great. Yeah.
I'm stopping sharing. So anything else? Like we don't need to sit here until 8 p.m., but we can go longer, like as long as you want to learn something. from Leigha? Something else? Everybody's awfully quiet. Thank you so much. Yeah, like what? So I mentioned the folks even at the beginning, like there are experts on different verticals, but you're one of the rare experts who combines two worlds: the front end analytics world and the back end world, and so.
Thanks. I appreciate it. It was really fun getting to meet all of you and talking. I hope we all stay connected on social media, and I'll see you around the data world.
Thank you. Thank
Sounds
you.
good.
All the best
Looking
in the
forward
new
to it.
role.
Bye.
Thank
And
you.
Daniel, I'll email you tomorrow those resources.
Thank you.
Bye.
Okay. Thanks. Bye-bye, Leigha.